The cold winds of Winterfell howled across the grey walls as Sansa Stark stood near the window of her chambers. Snowflakes floated down quietly, but her thoughts were anything but calm. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. She had always known that in the Game of Thrones, kindness was weakness, and weakness got you killed. Jon Snow, her half-brother, no, her cousin, technically, was loved by the people. The men of the North would die for him. They called him the White Wolf, the true king in the North. But Sansa knew better. Jon had bent the knee to Daenerys Targaryen, a dragon queen with foreign blood, fire in her heart, and no loyalty to the North. And now Jon had returned from King's Landing, scarred by battle, eyes darker than before. He looked at her like she was the only family he had left. He trusted her, that would be his mistake. He didn't see what Sansa saw, a chance, a moment to finally take back control of their home forever. She wasn't going to risk the North getting dragged into another Targaryen war. She had seen what fire could do. She had felt what power tasted like. She wasn't going to give it up. That night, as the fires in the Great Hall burned low and the lords of the North drank and sang around long wooden tables, Sansa sat quietly beside Jon, her face calm, her lips smiling. But her mind was already miles away, setting plans into motion. "Your Grace," whispered Lord Royce, bending close to her ear. "Is it time?" Sansa didn't answer. She simply nodded. The next morning, Jon Snow awoke to silence. No guards outside his chambers, no movement in the halls. As he stepped outside, confused, a group of Winterfell's own men surrounded him. "Sansa wants to see you," said the captain, his eyes down. Jon didn't understand. When he entered the Great Hall, he found Sansa sitting on the high seat where Ned Stark once ruled. Robb Stark, too. Her red hair was braided like a crown, and her eyes met his with a cold, unfamiliar look. "Sansa?" Jon asked, stepping forward. "What is this?" Sansa stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "I've made a choice, Jon. The North will not follow a man who bends the knee to a dragon queen. You may be my blood, but you are not our king." Jon stared at her, disbelief painted across his face. "You betrayed me?" Sansa didn't blink. "I protected the North." Jon's heart pounded in his chest. He looked at the men around him, his own people, turning their eyes away from him in shame. "You would throw me aside, after everything we've been through," he said, voice shaking. Sansa stepped down from the seat, walking toward him. "You were never meant to rule. You don't want it. You follow your heart, Jon. That makes you honorable. But honor doesn't win wars. It doesn't protect people." He laughed bitterly. "You sound just like Cersei." Sansa flinched, but only for a second. "Take him to the crypts," she said coldly. "He's to remain there under guard. He's not to be harmed, unless he tries to leave." Jon's fists clenched, but he said nothing. As the guards led him away, Sansa turned back to the hall. Her voice rang out strong and clear. "From this day on, the North is ruled by no one but its own. No queens, no dragons, no false kings. I am Sansa Stark, the Queen in the North." The hall erupted in chants. "Queen in the North! Queen in the North!" But outside the castle, in the dark woods beyond Winterfell, a raven took flight, heading south, to Daenerys, to vengeance, to war. The crypts of Winterfell were cold, colder than Jon remembered. He sat on a stone bench near Lyanna Stark's tomb, staring at her name. His breath came out in white clouds, his wrists still bound with iron chains, though the guards outside the chamber were respectful. They weren't cruel, just silent, loyal to the North, loyal to her, Sansa. The betrayal stung deeper than any wound he'd taken in battle. It wasn't just political, it was personal. After everything, the Boltons, Ramsay, the Battle of the Bastards, the Night King, he had thought they'd earned each other's trust. But clearly, Sansa had seen him as a threat, or worse, an obstacle. Jon didn't blame her for wanting peace for the North. He blamed her for sacrificing him to get it. Above ground, Winterfell had changed. Sansa now wore deep crimson cloaks with direwolf embroidery. Her voice echoed in the halls like a queen's, calm and sharp, like freshly honed steel. Lords and ladies from neighboring houses arrived to pledge fealty to her. Some came willingly, Others came out of fear of being left behind. "She's strong," they whispered. "Smart, cold, but not cruel. She'll keep the north safe." And Sansa welcomed them with warm words and cold eyes. But one night, as snow blew sideways through the courtyard, a new raven arrived from the south. It bore Daenerys Targaryen's seal. Maester Vulcan brought it to her personally in her chambers. She broke the seal without hesitation and read the parchment. Her hands went still halfway through. Jon's imprisonment had not gone unnoticed. The letter was brief but brutal. "Release Jon Snow, or I will come to Winterfell with fire. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the Unburnt, Queen of the Andals and the First Men." Sansa stared at the flame-shaped wax that sealed the message, her mind spinning. She knew Daenerys would not bluff. She had seen what Dragonfire did in the south. She had heard whispers of what happened in King's Landing, but if she released Jon now, she'd look weak. Her rule would be questioned. People would say she folded to a foreign queen, that her crown could be taken as easily as it was worn, so she sent her own raven in return. No apologies, no threats, just one sentence: "The North is free. We bow to no one." 3 days later, the first warning came. A farmer in the village of Sherbrooke, just north of the Neck, saw a great shadow pass over his field. He looked up, thinking it was a storm cloud, but it was a dragon, Rhaegal. The green beast roared across the skies, its wings stretching like sails over the clouds. It didn't burn anything yet, but its presence was a message. Daenerys was coming. Back in the crypts, Jon knew nothing of the approaching danger until Arya came. She slipped past the guards like a ghost, stepping out from behind a stone pillar with needle at her hip. Her face was unreadable. "You look like a ghost," she said. Jon looked up, surprised. "I feel like one." She sat beside him. "She shouldn't have done this to you." "I don't blame her," he said quietly. "She's trying to protect the North." Arya narrowed her eyes. "No, she's trying to control it." There was silence for a while, only the distant wind outside. Arya looked around at the crypts, her voice lower now. "Daenerys is coming, with her dragon." Jon's jaw clenched. "She'll burn the North. She'll burn Sansa if she has to," Arya said sharply. "You know what happens when people don't bend the knee to her." Jon didn't reply. He knew. He'd seen King's Landing reduced to ash. He'd watched innocents scream under the shadow of Drogon. Daenerys had once seemed like the savior of the realm. Now she was unpredictable. Fire and fury in a silver-haired body. "Let me out," Jon said. Arya shook her head. "If I free you, Sansa will call me a traitor too. She'll have me hunted. I won't let that happen." "You can't promise that," she said bitterly. Jon turned to her. "Then what do we do?" Arya hesitated. Then she leaned in closer. "You can't stop Daenerys with words. You're going to have to choose, Jon. Sansa or the Dragon Queen. One of them will burn the other." That night, above the gates of Winterfell, a loud screech cracked the silence. Rhaegal had landed. Sansa stood on the battlements, her cloak flapping behind her, watching Daenerys approach on foot, flanked by Unsullied. The soldier stood tall and expressionless. Grey Worm's face was hard, his hand on the hilt of his spear. Daenerys, dressed in black and red, stopped at the edge of the courtyard, her hair braided like thorns. Sansa came down to meet her, steps slow but confident. "You dare threaten the North?" Sansa said, her tone ice-cold. "You dare imprison my ally?" Daenerys replied, voice sharp. "He bent the knee to you, not me." Daenerys stepped forward. "Release him, or your people will burn." Sansa didn't move. "If you strike, you prove everything I warned them about." The tension crackled like lightning. Above them, Rhaegal growled, and in the shadows of the crypt, Jon Snow was being unchained by someone unexpected, Bran. "You've been quiet too long," Bran said calmly. "It's time to decide who you are, Stark, Targaryen, or something else." Jon stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. His sword, Longclaw, was returned to him. He looked toward the sky, toward the dragon's roar, and knew the war hadn't ended. It had just begun. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. The wind screamed through Winterfell's towers as Rhaegal loomed above the castle walls, his wings folded but ready. His yellow eyes glowed like burning coals, watching the people below as if deciding who would die first. In the courtyard, neither Sansa nor Daenerys had blinked. They stood across from each other like two queens carved from stone. One dressed in ice, the other fire. The soldiers behind them waited for the order, because one word from either woman could turn Winterfell into a graveyard. "You once wanted to break the wheel," Sansa said calmly. Her eyes locked on Daenerys's. "But now you are the wheel, and the North won't be crushed under it." Daenerys took a step forward, her face tight. "Jon Snow was the only thing keeping this alliance alive. I loved him, I trusted him, and you caged him like a dog." "You don't rule the North," Sansa replied. "And you never will." From the wall above, archers aimed their bows at the Unsullied. Below, the Unsullied raised their shields. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown to death. Then, "Enough!" The voice came from behind them. Everyone turned. Jon Snow stood at the top of the stairs, Longclaw strapped across his back, his black cloak swirling in the wind. Beside him, Arya and Bran flanked him like silent shadows. His eyes were hollow, stormy with rage and grief. Daenerys stared at him, her expression crumbling. "Jon," he didn't answer. His eyes moved between the two women he once loved like family, and the two who now stood ready to destroy each other. Sansa's voice broke the silence. "Who freed you?" Jon didn't look at her. "Does it matter?" She stepped toward him, her eyes pleading, her tone suddenly softer. "I did what I had to." "You betrayed me," he said, cutting her off. "Not just me. The people. You chose power over peace." Daenerys moved quickly to his side, touching his arm. "Come with me. Let's leave this frozen tomb. Let me take you away from all of this." Jon slowly pulled his arm away. "You came here with a dragon to threaten my home. You're not the same woman I followed south." Rhaegal let out a low growl above them. For a long moment, the three of them stood there, Jon, Sansa, Daenerys, at the center of a storm none of them could fully control. Then Bran, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "The past is already written," he said softly. "But this moment is what will decide the future of Westeros." No one understood Bran, but his words felt heavy, like prophecy. Suddenly, a commotion from the gates broke the silence. Riders from the woods beyond Winterfell, a group of northern lords rode in, their banners half frozen in the wind. One of them, a grizzled man in dark furs, dismounted and bowed quickly before Sansa. "My lady," he said, panting, "House Karstark and House Manderly. They've switched allegiance. They're riding for Winterfell with Daenerys's banner." Sansa's face paled. Daenerys's eyes sparked with satisfaction. "Looks like not all Northerners share your pride, Lady Stark." Jon stepped forward, fists clenched. "Stop this. All of you. If we go to war here, thousands will die. For what? Who sits in a chair?" Sansa looked at him, her voice cold. "You still don't understand. This isn't just about a chair. It's about who the North answers to. You think Daenerys will let us go quietly? She'll keep marching until every holdfast from here to the wall flies her flag." Daenerys stepped up. "That's right. Because I won't stop until the realm is whole and better than it ever was." Arya tilted her head. "And if they refuse?" There was a long silence. Daenerys didn't answer. Rhaegal did. He let out a deep, threatening roar that echoed through the stone and bone of Winterfell. That was answer enough. Jon looked between them again, and it was like watching two halves of himself tearing apart. Then he turned to Daenerys. "Call off your army and let Sansa get away with this," she said. "She locked you in the dark. She played queen behind your back. She deserves punishment." Jon's jaw tightened. "You'll burn a Stark in her own home? How is that any different than what the Lannisters did?" Daenerys's breath caught in her throat. For a second, pain crossed her face. Then anger. "I'm not them," she said. "No," Jon whispered. "You're worse. Because you tell yourself it's justice." That was the moment something broke in Daenerys. She looked up at Rhaegal, her hand rising. Sansa shouted, "Archers!" "Ready." Jon grabbed Daenerys' hand. "Don't, please." But it was too late. Rhaegal opened his mouth. A soft rumble filled the air. Then, an arrow. It flew from one of the outer towers. Not Sansa's men, not the Northerners. It was a Karstark rebel, hidden among the arriving reinforcements, and the arrow hit Rhaegal straight through his eye. The dragon let out a blood-curdling shriek and fell backward, crashing against the side of the wall. Stone collapsing beneath his massive body. Everything froze. Daenerys screamed, not in rage but in agony. She ran toward the crumpled dragon, falling to her knees beside Rhaegal's bleeding body. "No!" Jon stood frozen. Sansa's eyes were wide with horror. "I didn't order that." Daenerys rose slowly, her face soaked in tears, but her eyes now empty. "Dead. She dies," Daenerys whispered, looking at Sansa. "She dies for this." And from the trees outside Winterfell, Drogon the last dragon descended. Fire was coming, and Jon knew. There was no more room for peace. Rhaegal's broken body lay against the shattered walls of Winterfell, his green scales soaked in blood, steam rising from the massive wound in his skull. The arrow had pierced deep, a clean shot, too perfect to be random. His wings twitched once more, then went still. Daenerys knelt beside him, her fingers pressed against his scaly neck as if she could still feel his warmth. Her lips trembled. Her breathing was shallow, sharp, not like grief, but like rage trapped in a shaking cage. Jon tried to speak. "Dany," she stood up slowly, her face pale and haunted. Her eyes locked on Sansa. "You did this." "No!" Sansa's voice cracked. "I swear it wasn't me." "That wasn't one of my men." Daenerys stepped forward, her hair wild, her cloak soaked in snow and blood. "It was your war, your betrayal, your pride. You drew this line. I didn't." "Liar," Daenerys hissed. And then, from above, a deafening roar. Drogon. He descended through the clouds like vengeance made flesh, circling the sky before slamming onto the ground beside Rhaegal's corpse. He sniffed the fallen dragon, let out a high-pitched moan, then slowly turned his head toward the courtyard, toward Sansa, toward Winterfell. "No," Jon whispered, stepping in front of Daenerys. "Don't do this." But Daenerys didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on the woman she believed had stolen everything, her power, her ally, her family. Drogon snarled, smoke rising from his jaws, and Daenerys spoke a single word. "Dracarys." Jon tackled her to the ground. The fire came instantly, a blast of searing orange light erupting from Drogon's mouth. It surged toward the castle wall, not toward Sansa directly, but toward the battlements where her archers stood. 3 of them vanished in flame and screams. Stone cracked. Wood caught fire. The shock wave shook the entire keep. Sansa backed away, her heart thudding, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Are you mad?" she screamed. "You'll destroy us all." The Northmen screamed as Unsullied rushed the gates. Steel clashed against steel. Blood soaked the snow. The battle for Winterfell had begun. Jon shoved Daenerys aside. "Stop this!" "Call him off." She didn't answer. She walked toward the chaos like a goddess descending into a pit of war, her face glowing in firelight, her mind somewhere far from mercy. Inside the castle, Arya moved like a shadow, slicing her way through soldiers who didn't even see her coming. She was looking for Sansa. She had to get her out. She found her near the broken tower, surrounded by smoke, holding a dagger with shaking hands. "We have to run," Arya said. "I won't abandon my home," Sansa snapped. "You'll die here." "Then I'll die a Stark." Arya grabbed her by the arm. "Not today, you won't." Meanwhile, Bran sat in the Godswood, eyes rolled back, ravens flying overhead as his mind traveled. He saw the future unraveling like threads burning at both ends. Drogon laying waste to Winterfell, Jon standing alone in the snow, Daenerys on a throne of ash. He saw fire. He saw betrayal, and then he saw something else. A face, Tyrion Lannister. Far to the south, the former Hand of the Queen read a raven's message with shaking hands. He closed his eyes. "She's lost," he muttered. Beside him, Ser Davos sighed. "And the north?" "Burning," Tyrion said. "We waited too long." Back in Winterfell, Jon climbed the broken stairs to the wall, Longclaw drawn, his face streaked with ash. Above him, Drogon circled again. He knew what he had to do. He called out to the beast, "Drogon!" The dragon's head snapped toward him. Jon didn't run. He dropped his sword. The dragon hovered. Daenerys stepped onto the wall, staring at him. "Get away from him." "No," Jon said, his voice firm. "Kill me if you have to. But this ends now. You think you can talk me down?" "I know you," Jon said, stepping closer. "I saw the good in you once. I loved you. But this isn't who you were." "She killed him," Daenerys whispered, glancing at Rhaegal's corpse. "She tore him from me." "She didn't shoot that arrow," Jon said. "This wasn't Sansa, it was war. It's always war. She wanted to rule alone, and now you're proving her right." Daenerys flinched. Drogon let out a low growl. "Confused. She betrayed you," Daenerys said. Jon's voice was soft. "So did you." She turned away for a second, her shoulders shaking, and that's when Arya struck, a blade at her throat. So fast even Jon didn't see her coming. "I don't want to kill you," Arya said quietly. "But I will." Daenerys didn't move. Sansa appeared at the lower courtyard, dragging herself through the rubble, coughing, her hair matted with blood. "I never wanted this," she shouted up to them. "But you forced our hand." Daenerys closed her eyes. Jon stepped forward. "Call off the dragon." Arya pressed the blade tighter. "I can still forgive you," Jon whispered. Silence. Then, slowly, Daenerys raised a hand. Drogon stilled, his wings folded, his mouth closed. The fires stopped. Everyone stood in place. Frozen in the quiet that followed, Jon lowered his head. "Thank you." Daenerys turned to him, and for the first time in weeks, tears filled her eyes. But the damage was done. Hundreds dead. Winterfell burned. Trust shattered beyond repair. And as dawn crept over the horizon, Jon Snow looked down at the broken ground of his childhood home. He knew that this peace would not last, not with Daenerys alive, not with Sansa still wearing a crown, not with Drogon still breathing. The fires of Winterfell smoldered through the night. What remained of the Godswood was soaked in smoke. Towers cracked, stone blackened. Bodies, men of the north, unsullied, even children caught in the blast, lay scattered like broken dolls in the snow. The air stank of ash and blood. But Drogon was still. Coiled like a watchful serpent atop the hill behind the keep, he guarded the corpse of Rhaegal. He hadn't flown since Daenerys called him off. He simply watched, his massive chest rising and falling with every slow breath, his eyes never leaving the castle. Inside the great hall, the survivors gathered. The banners of House Stark had been torn and soaked, but they still hung. Jon sat at the long table, exhausted, head in his hands. His cloak was torn, his face covered in soot. Longclaw rested beside him, but he hadn't touched it since the fight ended. Sansa entered with Arya and Bran behind her, her limp barely noticeable. Her left arm was wrapped in blood-stained cloth. Daenerys stood by the hearth. Her dress was black, her expression darker. Not defiant now, just cold, quiet, like a storm that hadn't passed. "Just paused. Speak," Sansa said, stepping forward. "You owe us that." Daenerys turned slowly. "You want me to beg?" "I want to understand if you feel anything," Sansa snapped. "You killed our men, burned our walls, for what? A throne you were never going to get." "I had the throne," Daenerys said, her voice flat. "Until your brother took it." Jon didn't lift his head. He didn't argue. Daenerys' eyes flicked to him. "You turned them against me. All of you. And I still spared you. Sparing us after burning our home isn't mercy," Arya said coldly. "It's control." Bran's voice cut through the tension, calm, icy. "You all speak of loyalty, of rule. But the world has already shifted beneath your feet." They turned to look at him. Bran tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something none of them could hear. "You think you've survived the worst," he said. "But this is only the beginning." "What are you talking about?" Sansa asked. Bran blinked. "The dragon is grieving, and so is she." He looked to Daenerys. "But dragons don't grieve like people, and neither do queens who've lost everything." Daenerys' lips tightened. "You still think I'll destroy you," she whispered. "Even now." "No," Sansa replied. "I know you will. Maybe not today, but someday, when you're angry again, when someone doesn't kneel fast enough, you'll do it." Jon stood up finally, his face empty. We can't keep going like this. This isn't a kingdom anymore, it's a powder keg. Sansa crossed her arms. Then say it. Out loud, Jon hesitated. Arya stepped closer to him, eyes narrow. Tell her she's not queen. Jon closed his eyes. Daenerys Stormborn, he said softly, opening them again. I release you from the north. You're not welcome here. Not as queen. Not as anything. Daenerys didn't flinch. She simply stared at him. Her jaw tightened. Her heart cracked, but she didn't let it show. You loved me once, she said. I still do, Jon replied. But that doesn't make you right. A long silence followed. Daenerys turned away. Then you leave me no choice. Bran's voice again, soft and strange. Careful. That choice may be your last. By midnight the hall had emptied. What little remained of Winterfell's leadership had retreated to their corners, each unsure who to trust. Arya and Sansa stood by the broken window overlooking the yard. Soldiers buried the dead in shallow graves. The fires were dying, but the pain hadn't. She'll try something, Arya whispered. She didn't come all this way just to be told no. Sansa nodded. I know, she's planning something. She's too quiet, Arya turned. Then we act first. Sansa looked at her sharply. You want to kill her? Arya's voice was low. You saw what she did. You saw what she wanted to do. Only one person stopped her. Jon, Sansa said. And he won't do it again, Arya replied. He still thinks there's good in her. Sansa's hand trembled. She looked out into the night. We're running out of time. In the chamber below the east tower, Jon sat alone. A bottle of old northern ale sat on the table beside him, half full. He didn't drink. He just stared at the fire, haunted. Daenerys stepped inside. He didn't turn around. You're leaving, he said. She nodded. At dawn. With Drogon. Yes. And where will you go? She paused. Somewhere the name Targaryen still means something. Jon finally looked at her. You could stay. Not as queen. Not as conqueror. Just as yourself. She smiled bitterly. I don't even know what that is anymore. You were kind once, Jon said. You believed in better things. I believed in you, she whispered. And look what that brought me. Jon stood slowly. He stepped toward her, close enough to touch. You're not beyond saving, Dany, but you have to stop fighting ghosts. The Iron Throne's gone. The war's over. She reached up, placed a hand on his chest. Not for me. They stared at each other in silence. For a moment it was like nothing had changed. Then Daenerys pulled back and walked away. An hour later, Arya stalked through the dark halls, her blade sheathed at her side. She stopped when she saw Bran, sitting quietly in the corner of the Godswood, his eyes closed. You see her? She asked. Yes, Bran murmured. Where? Bran's lips parted. She's already moving. Outside the walls of Winterfell, Drogon let out a low growl. Daenerys stood beside him, cloaked in black, her eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. She stared back at the castle, at the broken towers of her hopes. She whispered something into Drogon's ear. The dragon rose slowly, wings spreading like a shadow across the ground, and above the north the wind changed again. Not cold, not warm, but something that smelled like smoke. Snow fell gently across the battlefield that used to be Winterfell's courtyard. Everything was still, too still. The kind of silence that comes before a storm breaks again. Jon stood at the battlements alone, watching the sky. Dawn painted the horizon in grey and pale red, but no sun had risen. The night hadn't truly ended. It only grew quieter. He gripped the stone wall tightly. His breath came in small clouds. Every part of him wanted to believe she'd gone, that Daenerys had meant it when she said she'd leave, but Jon Snow had seen enough war to know. People rarely walk away from what they think belongs to them. Behind him, footsteps. He turned, half expecting Arya or a guard, but it was Tyrion. I thought you were in the south, Jon said. I was, Tyrion replied grimly. Then I got your raven. He looked around at the broken towers, scorched stone, patches of frozen blood. He gave a long, tired sigh. So this is what peace looks like. Jon didn't answer. Tyrion stepped closer, voice low. You gave her a chance, didn't you? Jon nodded slowly. And? She chose the throne again. Tyrion's eyes were heavy with disappointment, but not surprise. Then I suppose it's time we stop pretending she's anything else. Jon stared out at the woods. Do you believe people can change? Some, Tyrion said, but not when they think destiny is on their side. Not when they ride dragons and believe the world owes them worship. She was good once, and you were dead once. Doesn't mean you should go back to it. Jon gave a bitter smirk. Maybe I should. Tyrion looked at him long and hard. You've always tried to save everyone but yourself. Maybe this time you save the realm from yourself. Jon turned, confused. What do you mean? She won't leave you alive, Tyrion said. Not now. Not after what she's lost. Not after how many times she's been told no. Jon didn't reply, because in his heart he already knew. That same morning, Arya stood with Sansa on the northern watchtower. The air was colder than usual. Not winter cold, just empty. A kind of stillness that made Arya's skin crawl. She's coming back, Arya said. Sansa nodded. She can't stand losing. I should have killed her when I had the chance. You would have started another war, Sansa said. We still need Jon. Arya's jaw clenched. He still thinks he can save her. Sansa looked at the woods in the distance. Then he'll die trying. Far beyond the tree line, in a clearing slick with frost, Daenerys stood beside Drogon once more. This time, she was not dressed for battle. She wore a simple black robe, no armor, no crown. But her eyes were darker than ever, burnt from within. Beside her stood two unsullied commanders. One held a scroll. The other held a dagger. She reached out, took the scroll, and placed it into a raven's clawed grip. To Jon Snow, she whispered. The raven flew toward Winterfell, wings slicing the cold air. She turned to Drogon, pressing her hand to his side. He let out a low groan. Not yet, she whispered. Let them hope. Groan. Not yet, she whispered. Let them hope. Jon received the scroll just before nightfall. He broke the seal and unfolded the message. It wasn't long, one last chance. Come alone. The gods would. No blades, no titles. Just truth. Jon read it twice, then burned it in the fire. He didn't speak a word to anyone, just put on his black cloak, left Longclaw on the table, and walked out into the night. Arya saw him leave. She followed in silence. From behind a snow-covered wall, she watched him disappear into the trees toward the godswood. She didn't stop him, not yet, but her hand stayed close to her dagger the whole time. She moved like a shadow after him. The godswood was silent. The red leaves of the heart tree trembled gently, though no wind blew. Snow dusted the branches like the first day of winter. Jon stood beneath it, waiting. Daenerys arrived not long after. Her steps soft, her expression unreadable. He watched her carefully. I came, he said. Alone, no sword. She gave a tired nod. Thank you. Silence. I meant what I said, she told him. I would have left. I would have tried to start over. But, Jon asked, but I can't. Why? She took a shaky breath. Because the world doesn't let people like me start over. Every time I try, someone tears it away. First Viserys. Then Khal Drogo, then Jorah, Missandei, Rhaegal, and now you. I didn't kill Rhaegal. You turned everyone against me, she said quietly. You're the reason they doubt. You're the reason they whisper. He looked down. You're wrong. No, she whispered. I just didn't want it to be true. She stepped closer. Jon didn't move. Daenerys reached up, placed her hand gently on his cheek. I loved you, she said. I know, he replied, and you love me. I did. A pause. Then her eyes flicked to his. Chest, then why is there a blade under your cloak? Jon froze. Her hand darted forward, yanking his cloak aside. A dagger was hidden beneath. Not Longclaw, smaller. Arya's Daenerys stepped back in horror. You were going to kill me? No, he began. I gave you one more chance. She screamed. Snow flurried around them. The godswood trembled, and from behind the tree, Arya appeared, blade drawn. Step away from him, she said coldly. Daenerys turned to her. Eyes wild. You never trusted me. I never trusted tyrants, Arya replied. Drogon's roar echoed in the distance. Jon, move, Arya said, but Jon didn't. He stood still, torn between love and loyalty. Between peace and the fire he'd once knelt to. Daenerys took a step forward. Jon whispered, Don't. She didn't stop, and Arya lunged. Steel flashed in the moonlight. Arya moved like a whisper, her blade slicing through the cold air faster than breath. The distance between her and Daenerys was nothing. She had killed Night Kings with less, but Daenerys was ready. She stepped aside, just in time. Arya's blade scraped her ribs, slicing through the fabric of her cloak, but not flesh. Daenerys spun, her knee catching Arya in the stomach. The younger Stark stumbled back. Jon shouted, "Stop!" But neither listened. Daenerys drew a small blade of her own, thin Valyrian steel, old as House Targaryen. Her eyes glinted with fury and heartbreak. "You think you're assassins?" She spat at Arya. "I've been hunted my whole life. I was forged in fire, and I was born in blood," Arya hissed, circling her again. "You think you're the only one who lost everything?" Jon stepped between them. "No more," he growled. "No more death." Daenerys' blade pointed at Arya. "Call her off." Arya didn't move. Jon turned to Arya, desperate. "Arya, don't. She'll burn everything," Arya snapped. "You saw what she did. What she almost did. She's not beyond saving. Neither was Cersei," Arya shot back. "And we both know how that ended." Daenerys' lip curled. "I'm not Cersei. You're worse," Arya said, "because people still want to believe in you." Arya lunged again, but this time Jon blocked her. He caught her wrist mid-strike, his strength stopping her cold. Arya looked up, shocked. "You'd protect her." Jon's voice trembled. "I'm protecting you from doing something you can't take back." Arya stared at him for a long moment, her breath fast, her hand clenched. Then she lowered the blade. "I should have known," she whispered bitterly. "You always choose the wrong queen." She turned and disappeared into the trees, her shadow swallowed by snow. Jon stood there, heart pounding, unsure of everything, except that this wasn't over. Daenerys sheathed her blade, shaking slightly. "She would have killed me." "I know," Jon said. "And what about you?" she asked. "If I hadn't seen your blade, would you have struck first?" Jon looked down. "I don't know." She stared at him, as if trying to burn the truth out of his soul. Then softly she said, "Yes, you do." Jon didn't argue. "I didn't come here to kill you," he said. "I wanted to believe. There was still something left of the woman I knew. The woman who freed slaves and broke chains." "I am that woman," she said. "No," he whispered. "That woman died in King's Landing." Daenerys' face broke for just a moment. The grief, the loneliness, the fury all swirled together in her eyes. Then came the cold again. "You're not fit to judge me," she said. "You, the bastard who hid his name until it was convenient. You think because you have Stark blood and dragon blood, you can choose who rules." "I don't want to rule," Jon said. "I never have." "Then step aside," she snapped. "Let me finish what I started." He shook his head. "What you're starting is another reign of terror. And what would you do instead? Let Sansa wear a crown she didn't earn? Let the North become a splintered kingdom ruled by shadows and fear?" Jon took a step toward her. "At least Sansa knows fear. You think you're above it." "That's what makes you dangerous." "I'm necessary," Daenerys snarled. "This world doesn't change through kindness. It changes through fire," Jon nodded slowly. "Then I was wrong about you." Daenerys looked at him, and for a moment the fire dimmed in her gaze. "I loved you, Jon, and I'll always love who you used to be." She stepped forward. Her hand brushed his face. He didn't pull away. Her touch was soft, but her fingers trembled. "This is our last chance," she said. "Fly with me. Burn the old world. Build something better." He stared at her, his breath slow, his voice barely above a whisper. "You already burned it." Then a sharp sound cut through the air. Blade quick, quiet, clean. Jon had moved before he knew he was moving. His dagger, Arya's, was buried deep in Daenerys' chest. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, but no words came. She looked down at the blood spreading across her dress, dark and fast. Her hand gripped his cloak, holding on to him as if she still didn't believe it. Jon caught her as she collapsed. He lowered her to the ground, cradling her head in his hands. Her breath came in gasps. Her blood soaked the snow beneath them. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." She blinked slowly, lips trembling. One final breath escaped her, then silence. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen was dead. The godswood was still. Even the trees seemed to mourn. In the distance, Drogon's scream shattered the air. It was no longer a roar, it was a cry. He rose above the trees. Wings stretched wide, sensing what had happened. He flew toward the godswood, the earth trembling beneath his shadow. Jon stood, still, unmoving, and then Drogon appeared, landing hard in front of him. The snow melted around his claws. He looked at Jon, saw her body, let out another shriek, one so loud and full of pain that the crows fled the trees. Jon waited. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He met the dragon's eyes, ready to burn. But Drogon didn't unleash fire. He moved toward Daenerys's body, nudging it gently with his nose. She didn't move. He looked at Jon again, and instead of killing him, he screamed into the sky and beat his wings. Then he picked her up, her entire body curled in one massive claw, and soared into the clouds, flying east until he vanished. Jon stood in the silence, alone, again, alone, again. Snow kept falling, long after Drogon disappeared into the clouds with Daenerys's body. No one had seen where he went. East, perhaps. Across the narrow sea, or to some forgotten corner of the world where fire still ruled. But Jon didn't watch. He remained in the godswood, knees in the bloodied snow, staring at the patch of earth where her body had been just minutes ago. She was gone. And somehow, he still felt hollow. When he finally stood, he walked back to Winterfell alone. The gate guards saw the blood on his hands, the blade on his hip, and the empty look in his eyes. None asked what happened. They all already knew. Inside the great hall, Sansa sat at the head of the long table, flanked by Arya and Bran. Tyrion stood nearby, silent as a grave. When Jon entered, everyone rose. No one spoke. Sansa stared at him for a long time, searching his face. Finally, she said softly, "Did she fight?" He nodded once. "Not enough," Arya didn't flinch. She only said it had to be done. Bran's voice, as usual, felt like it came from some place far older than his years. "The realm will remember this day, whether as the end of fire, or the beginning of something worse." Jon approached the center of the room. "She's gone," he said, voice low. "Drogon took her. Flew east. Is he coming back?" Tyrion asked. "I don't know." Silence settled over the room like a fresh blanket of snow. Then Sansa stood. "The threat is gone," she said. "But the north is broken. Our men are dead. Our walls are crumbling. And the world still watches us. What do you plan to do?" Tyrion asked. Sansa looked around the hall. Her eyes landed on Jon last. "I plan to rule," Jon blinked. "Rule what?" "The north," she said, "as it always should have been. Not under the Iron Throne. Not under dragons. As a free kingdom." Arya stepped forward. "And what about the south?" "The south will do what it always does," Sansa replied. "Fight over scraps and crowns. But we won't bleed for their games anymore." Jon shook his head slowly. "You think it's that simple?" "No," she said. "I think it's necessary." Tyrion spoke then, his voice tired but sharp. "There's already word spreading in the Riverlands that Daenerys is dead, that Jon Snow killed her." He looked at Jon. "You know what that means?" Jon nodded. "I'll be hunted." "Some will call you a murderer," Tyrion continued. "Others, a hero. But either way you can't stay." Arya turned to him. "Then come with me." Jon blinked.
"Where?"
"West," she said. "Past the seas, past maps, past thrones and dragons and the ghosts of this place." But Jon didn't answer. He looked at Bran. The boy, no, the king now, met his gaze without blinking. "I'll go north," Jon said quietly. "Back to the wall." "It's gone," Arya said. "There's no night's watch." "There's still a wall," Jon replied. "And there are still people behind it, wildlings, survivors, ghosts." He looked at Sansa. "I've brought enough death here. Let me leave before more follows." Sansa's voice cracked, but only barely. "Will you come back?" Jon smiled faintly. "Not in this life." Then he turned and left, his footsteps the only sound in the hall. 3 weeks later, the snows had begun to thaw, just slightly. Ravens flew with messages from every corner of the realm. Lords debated. Cities rebuilt. Fleets shifted. But in Winterfell, Sansa Stark was crowned, queen in the north. Her people cheered beneath grey skies. They had buried too many kings, watched too many southern wars bleed into their lands. But this was their own. Arya stood beside her, sword at her hip, cloak in the wind. She would not stay long, though. Her eyes were already on the sea. Tyrion returned to King's Landing, what was left of it, sworn in again as Hand. Not because he wanted the job, but because someone had to keep the game from tearing itself apart again. And Bran the Broken sat on a throne, carved from stone and memory, seeing what others could not, watching the realms shift. But Jon, he rode north, past the broken gates of Castle Black, past the ruins, past the wall, with Ghost at his side and Tormund leading what remained of the free folk. He vanished into the snow, not a king, not a Stark, not a Targaryen, just a man walking into legend. But Westeros never forgets, and somewhere, across the sea, in a forgotten land where shadows dance and dragons still sleep, a black shape circles the sky, waiting, burning, remembering the end.